Hey guys, so today I wanted to talk about this BuzzFeed article posted by Stephanie McNeil on October 1st of this year, shortly after Acacia announced her departure from her career as a momfluencer. Forewarning that I talk fast, which will hopefully come in handy to speed through the steaming pile of self-aggrandizing, pathetic excuse for journalism. Also, for the sake of brevity, I'm not going to read aloud the article's text, but it will be on screen for you to follow along. Firstly, let's talk about journalism. Now, I know that in this day and age, journalism is a Hunger Games Kafkaesque nightmare where the reader unwillingly, or most of the time willingly, runs off a cliff and dives preconceived notions first into misinformation, echo chambers, and ego-serving op-ed pieces like this one. Just because this is the norm doesn't mean that journalists are incapable of writing well-rounded and well-researched articles, but if I'm using this article as a piece of data for a predictive model, that's exactly what kind of journalist Stephanie McNeil is. Now, maybe I'm expecting too much. After all, this is a BuzzFeed article, so I'm sure it was written by an overworked and probably underpaid intern in about 10 minutes. Low-hanging fruit or not, it doesn't mean it gets a free pass from criticism, especially not from me. Let's go ahead and talk about the 5 pillars of journalistic integrity, which are truthfulness, accuracy, objectivity, impartiality, fairness, and public accountability. If you've read even one paragraph of this article, you know that none of these pillars are implemented. Framing and priming are the basis of any influential media piece writer, but they can be severely misused and become weapons of the reader. My goal in this video is not to deny or validate all of the claims with facts, receipts, and timelines, but to look at the article critically and read between the lines to boil down the motives, reasons, and methods used to create it, and how Stephanie missed every single one of those pillars. Just for transparency, I skipped a little bit of the article as it only served as very basic information related to the title, which is reiterated in the rest of the article. These first few lines are setting the tone for the rest of the article. This first paragraph gives a very wide-lensed view of Acacia's early years on the internet. I won't spend too much time on how she portrays Acacia's genesis because I don't believe it has much impact on the structure of the article. However, it is interesting that she only mentions the more controversial and sensationalized events of the Tumblr years, where one could potentially make a reasonable argument that she received undeserved hate. In the rest of the article, she'll continue to separate Acacia from the audience and will give the impression that things only happen to Acacia, and that Acacia essentially functions in a social vacuum. This presupposition is not true for any online figure or person in general. I find it highly suspect and borderline comedic that Stephanie mentions the write-ups but refuses to include them because they are yikes, but tells the reader to Google it and then cites an Urban Dictionary entry as her supporting argument for this section. The purpose of an article is to summarize, document, and distribute information, but instead of inserting an excerpt or citing sources of others' opinions of Acacia, Stephanie washes these write-ups as wholly negative, even down to the vibes. Just a quick side note, if you're reading an article that uses the words general bad vibes, yikes, and mentions Urban Dictionary even once, that's not an article. That's essentially just a long tweet, a long Facebook post, or a long Tumblr post. Perhaps it's an attempt to relate to the audience of readers. Let's face it, no 65-year-old man is going to read this article. He probably wouldn't even be able to pronounce Acacia's name. But to me, a 24-year-old woman consistently involved in online culture and public figures, this just reads like lazy writing. How is a reader supposed to know what you mean by general bad vibes? Imagine if instead of researching and writing the script, I just said, I don't know, y'all, the vibes are just like, not it. Hella sus. Rancid, unseasoned vibes. How could I reasonably expect anyone to believe in my message or value my opinion at all? Okay, now we're getting into some of the more blatant omissions of information. I have an issue with the line, as she got older, her content changed. This implies that Acacia was slowly and gradually maturing and that her content followed suit. In reality, Acacia was 17. The way Stephanie structures her timeline in this paragraph glosses over a major life decision that a barely legal person made in order to stay with a grown man. Stephanie also fails to mention Jairus' age, their breakup, and that their first child together was unplanned. Despite Acacia being a chameleon able to switch her aesthetic to any style that was trending, this point in Acacia's life is when her notoriety started to dwindle drastically despite the initial influx of attention from the pregnancy announcement. Most of her followers were in or around her same age group, and as Acacia started her journey into motherhood, she became less relatable to teenagers following her, especially with the uprooting of her entire brand the moment she got pregnant. Like I said, I'm not going to try to disprove or validate all of these specific claims with receipts, only focus on why things like this are mentioned in this article. So let's be clear. Acacia does receive a lot of criticism regarding her children, sometimes constructive, sometimes not, so this part is not wholly untrue. What it is, however, is the Dunning-Kruger effect. This is a type of bias that refers to how an individual can perceive a concept to be simple only because they are ignorant to all of the information. So the less informed you are on a topic, the simpler the topic seems. And since Stephanie has already done a fantastic job of watering down or misrepresenting major life events, public opinions, and minimizing Acacia's actions, there is no curiosity to push to understand the deeper reasons for these criticisms. This entire article reeks of the Dunning-Kruger effect, so keep an eye out for it. And here is yet another example of including the bare minimum of information in order to manipulate the reader. I have serious issues with how this section was written. Firstly, Stephanie directly mentions opinion Twitter and Acacia's detractors, indicating that she is writing specifically with us in mind for at least this section. There are a lot of reasons why she chose to do this, whether it be influence from Acacia herself, which many people suspect, guaranteed rage bait engagement, or she's simply ignorant. See above mention of Dunning-Kruger effect. The largest problem I have here is again the minimization, and here's why. When the disordered player minimizes the nature and seriousness of their or someone else's conduct, it's a telltale sign that they are likely to engage in the same or very similar behaviors repeatedly. If you always minimize conflicts, you'll never take them seriously enough to fix them because you don't recognize the impact the behavior has. Consequently, this is not plain ignorance, for if you didn't see it as an issue, you wouldn't feel the need to dismiss it. We've seen this perpetrated by Acacia herself countless times, so I'm not shocked to see it in this op-ed. It's also not uncommon for petty shots to be taken at trivial things in someone's life once they've committed a great sin in the eyes of the public. Once the audience has decided that an individual has lost their goodwill and is no longer deserving of their support, social niceties go out the window. I'm confused as to why Stephanie is confused, as she's a senior culture reporter for BuzzFeed based in New York. She should know this. Interesting. So far, Stephanie has set up her foundation for this article that Acacia was targeted for unjust reasons, yet now she says all female public figures and influencers face rabid armies of haters who watch their every move. I find this to be yet another instance of the social vacuum I mentioned earlier. Individuals do not all wake up one day and just out of the blue collectively decide to dislike and criticize someone for funsies. Sure, counterculture and being edgy and subversive are common with the rise of famous and infamous internet celebrity, but that's not even what Stephanie's implying here. Stephanie is giving the impression that two people with the same amount of interaction with a public figure can be positively or negatively differentiated by the individual's personal opinion of the public figure, regardless of the actual impact of that opinion on the public figure. Given that some time has passed since this article was published, it is obviously aged like milk on a sunny porch. Acacia has done the complete opposite of what Stephanie has written here and has now moved her postings behind a paywall on Patreon. I would hardly consider these last few years of Acacia's Instagram career steady or lucrative by the standard average of other influencers in her same niche, unless you include the $15K in revenue stolen from a smaller creator, which Stephanie conveniently omits in this section despite being the catalyst of her departure. I would hardly consider Acacia's victim complex and deflection poignant. She ran away because she could not face the consequences of her actions. Her career is not hurting her. She is self-destructing. Since she is a self-sufficient, or at least was, freelance content creator whose work was showing her life, I have no idea how anyone could separate Acacia's actions from her career. Separating the two is dishonest, inaccurate, and sets a dangerous precedent. Acacia is not separate from her choices. She fundamentally is those choices. She was called pathetic and cowardly due to her tucking her tail between her legs, but Stephanie frames these reactions as purely unhinged reactions to, according to this article, a healthy, well-thought-out, and beneficial decision that Acacia makes. Thanks for watching if you've made it this far. I really enjoy making analytical content like this, so if you enjoy it, I'll continue to make more. Thanks for all the support on Twitter and on my last video. It means a lot.
If you're watching this, baby, I know you are. I love you, and I appreciate you. And rock on.